The next question we have to address is your elevator pitch. So we've talked about opening lines, we've talked about starting moments. Usually what happens next in an interaction is you get around to this pesky question, which is, so, what do you do? And for so long, we've heard about the elevator pitch. And I am so tired of the elevator pitch. First of all, why are they for just elevators? I don't know about you, but I'm never pitching in elevators, ever. And second, why does it have to be a pitch? Right? Even priming someone for the idea of an elevator pitch makes it feel so salesy. I don't like that priming. So I want to change it. Let's get rid of the elevator pitch. I want to try something different. I much prefer what I call the log line. So log line is actually a Hollywood term. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. Everyone in my family is in the entertainment business. And my parents, who are producers, always used to come home and say that they were working on a show or a movie. And in our household, we'd say, what's the log line? So log line is a term that's used in Hollywood. It's a very brief summary that gives both an explanation of what a show or movie is, as well as some kind of a hook. It's kind of a sexy introduction. And so every TV show and movie out there has had a log line. They're pitched with it. Writers they're excruciatingly hard to find the right log line because they can sell an entire series or an entire movie. So here's a couple of examples for you. So before I give it to you, actually, if I were to ask you to summarize The Godfather in one sentence, the movie The Godfather, do you think you could do it? It's rough, right? That's a really hard one. But they had to summarize in one sentence. The reason I give these examples is because if I ask people, humans, to summarize themselves in one sentence, it feels overwhelming. And it is hard. It's impossible to get all of you in one sentence. But it is possible to give just enough to hook someone in. So mega series, The Godfather, this was the original log line. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. Right? That is a pretty great summary. And that hook, right? Reluctant son. You can just imagine how hard that would be. Clandestine empire, crime dynasty, right? Like all of that, all those words hook you. How about this one? This is the original logline for The Hangover. A Las Vegas set comedy centered around three groomsmen who lose their about-to-be wed buddy during their drunken misadventures, then must retrace their steps in order to find him. Immediately an adventure. Now, that's not how I would have described that movie, but I get it. And I'm kind of interested in it. Last one for you is The Lion King. The Lion King. Lion cub and future King Simba searches for his identity. His eagerness to please others and penchant for testing his boundaries sometimes gets him into trouble. Right? That was actually two sentences. They kind of cheated. So these are just examples of how it's a very quick summary with a little bit of an emotional hook. I think everyone should have a log line. This is totally different than an elevator pitch because it's a summary, but it's just a little bit of an emotional hook there. Here's why I think that we need to get rid of the idea of an elevator pitch and transfer to a log line. So let me share this story with you. I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was eavesdropping. I like eavesdropping. I like people. And there was these two people that were meeting. I don't know if it was an early date or what, but they were meeting. And the woman asks inevitably, so, what do you do or what keeps you busy, right? And he said, quote, and I was writing this down, I developed a system that helps young learners achieve their maximum success. And her response was, what? What? And they talked for a few minutes back and forth, like he was explaining it, and she was, and finally she goes, oh, you're a teacher. So it turns out he was a third grade teacher who developed a kind of interesting way of teaching mathematics to third graders and was trying to expand the curriculum to other schools. Here was the problem, is this elevator pitch was a pitch, right? He definitely worked hard on that, right? It took a long time to come up with the perfect words, but because it was so complicated and professional and almost sterile, it didn't mean anything. It was very hard to get to it. And this happens over and over and over again. I see these kinds of elevator pitches that sound real great, but don't mean much. So my business is a leader in the healthcare industry working to change the framework for cancer research. My mission is to have greater impact through visual avenues with avant-garde portrait taking. What happens is these all just cause more confusion. They maybe could come second or third, but really you're a teacher. You run a cancer research center. You're a portrait photographer. Then we can learn more about it. And I saw this happening over and over again with brilliant people, right? Really brilliant people come up with these really brilliant elevator pitches. And the problem with brilliant elevator pitches is sometimes they don't always translate. And I started to look into the science of why this happens, why we share these brilliantly written pitches, but they don't work. And I realized that really, when we're talking about losing attention, it's not boredom. Apathy and boredom is a problem with attention, but I think that confusion is the real enemy of attention. If you've ever sat in a college class where the teacher is going on about something really brilliant and you just can't follow it, you put down your pen. It's not even boredom, it's usually because you lost them, you're confused. That's really what we're fighting here, is not being boring, being too complicated. And this matches with the science. I created something called the hierarchy of facts based on this science. That as humans, we need to work sequentially. We're very sequential thinkers. And this is backed up by research. The study is called How the Brain Processes Social Information. And what this study found is that the brain has really hard time processing advanced social interaction, social information. It likes to know the basics first. So what they found is there are special brain mechanisms that have evolved to process the most important social information first. In fact, if you don't give someone that information first, they cannot hear you. And the order is typically like this. Gender, kin, and social status are first. And that's because they are essential for reproduction and survival. So this is actually something that has evolved over time, that we want to be able to learn this in sequence. So the typical hierarchy of facts, when you're talking to someone very first wants to know traits, like just general traits. And usually they can get that upon nonverbal, just seeing you, right? Then comes the basic occupation and demographic information. The problem with what that teacher shared was he shared a reason or a motivation. I developed a system for young learners to achieve maximum success. But the problem is she couldn't get what are you before she could learn the next thing, which is motivations, values, and history. That's usually what comes next. The very last one, if we're lucky in social interactions, is identity and fears. If someone starts with an elevator pitch that immediately goes into their identity and fears, people can't get it because they still haven't filled in the check boxes. And it is kind of like a checkbox. I hate to say that. We typically go check, know it, check, know it, check, know it, and then we can move on deeper. So what I want us to do is to make that essential social information really easily accessible so people can move that checklist quickly with us, especially when we're talking to clients or colleagues or we're in meetings. The way that I like to do this is we're going to do a little fill in the blank exercise. So you have a great log line. Awesome. If you need a little bit more help, here's an exercise I want you to go through. The very first thing I want you to think about is I am a blank. So in this sentence, you're probably going to choose an identifier of some kind, a job title. It could also be an adjective plus identifier. I'm going to give you examples in a second. And if you're really brave, it could be a small metaphor. Here's an example. So I started off with this basic introduction. I'm a writer, I'm a researcher. If I had to identify my profession, that's probably what I would say I do. The problem is these are a little boring, right? And I don't think that simple has to be boring. So if you have an identifier that feels a little bit dry, I want you to ramp it up a notch. So I was trying out. I'm a human behavior hacker. I'm a recovering awkward person. In fact, the first line of my book is I am a recovering awkward person. I think that a big problem in books that people just put down, they can't get to the first 5 or 10 pages, is because the author hits them with the best piece of knowledge or argument they got. But again, our brain can't process that in order because it hasn't gone through the checklist yet. The reason why this works so well and why I want you to keep it really simple, at least in the beginning while you're playing around with it, is because our brain loves labels. I know that labels are really hard. We struggle with them as a society, as a culture, but we have to be able to be in charge of our labels. I would rather give people the label that I want them to use for me than have them make up a label for me. So I like these because it helps us choose or be in charge of our labels. Again, give someone the label you want them to use so they don't create their own. Here's a couple of examples for you. I'm a mom-entrepreneur. Mom-entrepreneur. That was that example of an identifier plus an adjective. I'm a renegade teacher. I'm a corporate executive turned coach. I'm a baker, but for ideas. That one's a metaphor. I'm a flexitarian chef. I'm like a concierge for pets. These are all just a bunch of different examples of ways that you don't have to be boring with your label, but you can give a label that works for you, that's a little bit dopamine worthy. Now, if you're here, if you're like, I don't know exactly what I would call myself, that's okay. If you don't have this filled in yet, let's do the next part first. What do you know? So maybe you have to work backwards into your identifier. So what you might know is your story and your motivation. The other thing the brain loves is stories. When we hear once upon a time, our brain just lights up. So the other thing you can do, the reason why we love log lines, is they're kind of mini stories. Right? The Godfather was an aging patriarch of a clandestine empire who hands his business to his reluctant son. That's a story. It's 20 words, but it's a story. So you might also think about what's your story. Could that help you with your identifier? Or lastly, a reason. We also love to hear the why. So is there a reason why you do what you do? Could that be a backdoor into figuring out what your identifier is? Here's the next fill-in. I am a who helps blank. So maybe you know who you help, even though you don't know your identifier first. That's okay. Here is where you put your story of who you help or your story of how you help. Who do you help? How do you help? Here's a couple of examples. So I'm a human behavior hacker. I help high achievers be more memorable. It's very, very simple who I help and how I help them. Some other examples. I'm an entrepreneur. I help parents communicate with their kids using easy tips I had to learn the hard way. Notice that's not very long. She didn't go into a huge backstory, but you know her story, right? You can see, oh wow, she's helping people because she actually had it herself. Same with when I say I'm a recovering awkward person, that's 6 words that tell my story. In a very, very succinct way. I'm a flexitarian chef. After overcoming all kinds of health problems, I began creating recipes for people to eat for complete wellness. Very, very short story, but I know where he or she is coming from. Some other examples. I'm hoping this is getting your juices flowing with these examples. I'm a corporate executive turned coach. My clients are all brilliant, but need a little help with motivation, just like I did when I first started. And by the way, you could shorten this if you wanted to. You could even stop with help with motivation. I'm a baker, but for ideas. My goal is to help struggling entrepreneurs cultivate their great ideas. Another way they filled in the blank. Here's the last one. I am a who helps because. And this one, obviously, is your story of why. Right? So we work into why as the last part of your hierarchy. We don't want to start with why. Sometimes I've asked people, what do you do? And they say, my mission is, and it's too much. So I like to end with why because that's exactly where someone goes, check mark, check mark, check mark, and they follow you through on your log line. Couple of examples. So I'm a human behavior hacker. I help high achievers be more memorable. As a recovering awkward person, my goal is to teach people the social skills they never learned in school. Right? A very, very fast, short mission. Didn't take a whole bunch of pages. So for the momtrepreneur, I didn't have any support when I became a parent, and so my mission is to be there for struggling new parents. Right? Not too rocket science-y. Last one, the flexitarian chef. I learned too late that my diet was making me sick. I want to make sure others know what I didn't. Now you might also notice something interesting about all of these. All of them have hooks. All of them provide some kind of interesting intrigue. Like for example, this flexitarian chef one, I want to make sure others know what I didn't. What's your very next question? What is it? What didn't you know? So you're also in your log line, ideally, giving someone their very first question. So when I say I'm a human behavior researcher, usually the very next question I want them to ask, and they usually do, is, oh, what do you research? Or like what? Right? So you also want to think about, make it easy for them to ask their follow-up question. The follow-up question is really hard, usually for someone who's just been hit with your log line. So you might want to hook or get a little peak of interest to give them that first question, then be ready for it. So see if you can also stimulate that little hook. Here's the big thing I want to make sure you remember. It's 10 seconds. It's not 20, it's not 30, It's not a minute. It's 10 seconds. So all of those can be shared in under 10 seconds. And the reason why this is important is because the biggest problem with elevator pitches is they sound like they're being given in an elevator. Have you ever been in a networking event and you're like, so what do you do? It's over wine, it's loud, it's casual. And they launch into a 30-second explanation that's memorized with perfect words and lots of buzzwords. When that happens, it feels extremely formal and overly memorized. We also know that in a very casual back and forth conversation, 30 seconds is just too long of a turn, especially in a circle or a round table. If you stand up and take 30 seconds, people are like, oh, she is wordy, right? It's just too long for our social brains. So 10, maybe 12 seconds, right, at the most. That's really important for keeping that word count down. So here's what I want you to think about. While you're testing these out, try each part separately. You don't have to do all at once. So I would just start with IMA, right? See how that one feels. See what kind of reaction you get. See what kind of questions you get. For example, I used to say, I'm a writer. And it was really interesting because what people asked me back helped hone the next iteration of my pitch. If I said, I'm a writer, people would always say, what do you write about? And then I would say, human behavior. And I realized, I should probably share that a little bit earlier. And that's where it evolved into human behavior hacker, human behavior researcher. So start with different parts of it. See what questions you get, see what response you get. If you get a, huh, doing good. If you get a, huh, maybe change it, right? So also test out different pieces so you can see what the reactions are. And then slowly you can add each of those in, especially if it's over 10 seconds. You might want to start with different pieces until you can shorten it up.
Do you want even more tips on communicating with confidence? One of the fastest ways to achieve more success and more respect is to level up your people skills. If you want to master communication and increase your charisma, check out People School. This program comes with 12 in-depth video modules designed to radically change your interactions, communication, and confidence. You'll start applying each principle to your life immediately. I'll share my social blueprints, conversation frameworks, and fascinating science-based insights. Everything you need to finally understand the unwritten rules of behavior. Ask questions and get personal answers and feedback after every module. Join me for our live monthly workshops where I deliver exclusive new teaching only to People School students. I'll show you exactly what to do to be more influential and impactful in every conversation and situation, guaranteed. And if for some reason the program isn't right for you, no worries. You can get a full refund within the first 30 days. Thousands of students have joined People School and achieved their goals. Here's what just a few of our students shared about their experiences in People School. I got the promotion I was looking for. Thanks to the People School team for helping me along the way. What a ride. I have to say that I wish I was in People School way earlier in life. Wow. So much to absorb and can't wait to do it again and again. Since People School, I have never had such engaging and fun interviews in my life. Last Friday, I accepted a senior position with an increase in my total package of $100,000. People School has provided me with an exceptional amount of value and knowledge. I feel that there is so much to offer from this program. I'll be going through the lessons again. Thank you, Vanessa. One of my biggest regrets is I wish I had enrolled in People School years before now. The best part is People School never expires. We constantly add new bonus modules based on student requests. Want a raise or raise your rates? Check out our How to Get a Raise formula. Need new friends in a new city? Check out our How to Find Your People bonus. There are more than 35 hours of material waiting for you in People School. If you want to level up your career, your relationships, and your conversations, I would love for you to consider People School. I read every single one of your comments and can't wait to meet you in our next live workshop. Thanks so much for watching until the end. I'll see you in our next video.